think Dr. Pease put it best when he said, I'm not here to do any. I'm not here to replace the pep band. I'm here to start a marching band. That's the approach I took. You ran into some people that were upset. Certainly, it was a student organization that was being dissolved or being defunded, however you want to put it. Something was being taken away from one group of people. When you ran into those people from time to time, you were visibly upset, and it's just there wasn't anything you could do about it. So I just I'm sorry. There were several people that from the pep band that joined the marching band. They wanted something where they originally wanted to be in a marching band, didn't have one at UVA, so they joined the pep band, and then now we got a marching band. So there was a little bit of, I guess, relief for some people, and then other people that were really into the pep band, and they were very upset. I guess that was really the only experience I had with them. Just a couple individuals you ran into. I think I played the conservative role, just not there to argue with them, not there to really do anything about the pep band other than do the best job we could for the marching band. That first year was pretty tough. The first year of the band, just because everything's new, there was a lot of gear grinding going on. People are getting used to each other, there's nothing to point back. There was nothing to point back to and say this is the way we've done things and this is why we do it. Of course, when you've done things long enough, you don't even have to say why you do it anymore. It's just this is the way we do it. This is the UVA marching band way, or this is the Cavalier marching band way. There was nothing like that, so there was a good bit of shuffling going on, and it's tough to. I had to stay on top of all that. Obviously, Dr. Pease is a fairly intense person during rehearsal, so you have to stay on top of that as well. I can't be caught off guard. He was nice. He's a nice guy, certainly. Everybody loves him, but if you weren't prepared, he lets you know about it, and of course, being a drum major, you're there to facilitate the rehearsal. You can't not be prepared. We played at an assisted living home a couple times. The band was in Arcs, and some of the residents were there along with the Smiths, and I kicked off a song, and I forget what it was. I think it's Let's Go Who's, and I forgot to bring the horns up. That was rough. It obviously we had been playing, so people were alert and managed to get going because the drums started and nothing else. And let's just say we played that one again towards the end to make sure that we gave them a good showing. But I never forgot to bring up the horns after that. I think it was really just learning balance, and I think once you learn balance, it gets a lot more fun. It was always, the people are always fun, but when you're yelling at people, or when you're getting yelled at, or when things aren't working, it gets frustrating. Obviously, it's not as fun. And once you start to learn the pattern and you learn some balance and you're a little more prepared, it gets a lot more fun. But that first year was pretty tough, just because there was no groundwork laid ahead of time. You can't. There's nothing to do until you really get there and you start figuring it out as you go. Drew Ross was a lot of help. He offered a lot of advice on how to work with Dr. Pease, what his expectations of drum majors were going in, how the better drum majors have helped him and helped the band. So he was a huge help, in terms of, he helped me create some cheat sheets. That first year I really needed those in terms of knowing the drill. I would always lay out some drill in front of me on the podium on the left, and I would lay out the music on the right so I could keep up. Because Dr. Pease, I don't know if he was just doing it to do it or what, but he always asked the band, how many steps is the next move, and he would, every once in a while, he would ask me, and you didn't want to be caught off guard, because any hesitation, you're wasting the band's time, and that's not what you're there for. So I had to, again, it goes back to learning to be prepared for anything. And I know I owe Drew a lot to that first year, just getting better at the job. Yeah, because it was tough. It was just me and Logan, and he and I came from very different high schools, very different experiences. Logan was obviously the more organized of the two of us. I was the more energetic and I suppose outgoing. Not that Logan's not outgoing, but I was just a little more outgoing and could get people motivated. So there was learning to work with just the two of us. We had to cover a lot of ground. It was a blur. It was an absolute blur. It was September 11th, 2004, so it was still really hot out. First of all, there's nothing you can really do to prepare yourself for that first game. I mean, this was the first game of all first games, at least for the band. So there was no amount of rehearsal that could have really prepared for, oh my God, we're actually on TV and we're actually in front of 60,000 people. I tried to come off as confident. We were in the tunnels and I was shouting stuff to the people behind me, and just to get them hyped up. I remember I accidentally smacked myself in the face with my whistle, trying to get people hyped, and that kind of shut me up. Also not an omen, but the band, we went out, we came out of the tunnels, and of course it was something new, so the crowd noticed and they got into it. And Logan Riddick, the other drum major, and I took the field with the rest of the band, let them down, played the first couple of songs, let them off the field, and you start to pick up on some of the things that I think the band still experiences today, like the rush to get into the stands, and how there's never enough time to really get everybody up there before the game starts, and rushing people at the same time, trying to keep people calm too. That was a real big moment for me, when everyone's yelling and you're also yelling, and I think that was the first the first moment, or the real first experience, I guess, of having to think on my feet and I guess motivate people to move faster somehow. Because Dr. Pease is yelling, Mr. Phillips, the assistant band director, was yelling at me, so you have to send it down the chain, yell at them, they're yelling back, and it was interesting. It obviously it worked out, but you start to pick up on stuff, and being next to Dr. Pease for 60 minutes of football, you have to stay on your toes. You have to being prepared. We started to figure out that we needed bigger signs than what we had. We had these little bitty note cards to start, and then we had to blow it up. Realized that we need those in a hurry. We realized that there probably is no good system in terms of letting the band know what you're going to play next. I don't know if they've solved that yet. But I think that was the first time you realize that our uniforms in particular don't do a very good job of keeping you cool, and yet at the same time they don't keep you very warm either in the winter. Oh, I also remember the first game I lost my hat. The drum majors carried Cavalier hats. We never used them. We never wore them. The drum majors would carry hats in their hands for some reason. And I remember I placed it on they've got the wall that separates the stands from the field. I placed it on a wall, and of course 5 minutes later it's gone. So it's in somebody's office or home now, but I think that's when we realized that the drum majors didn't need to bring hats anymore when I lost mine. We also didn't have the sabers the first year, I don't think. I think that came later, because Logan and I tried to do the Big Ten drum major thing, a little more acrobatic, and I think they tried it later too. I think Brian Myers did a backflip at one point, but Logan and I aren't that athletic, so we probably would end up stabbing ourselves if we tried something. Again, we tried. There's always so much you can do to prepare. It's one of those things where you have to figure it out as you go. Like the speakers, like cramming people and getting people in and out of the stands. I think is always going to be a work in progress. I spent the summer trying to work on some sort of drum major routine. Logan just wanted to do the salute like you see a lot of high school drum majors do. When there's 60,000 person stadium, they're not going to see that. So we tried to do something bigger. I remember calling Pease and saying, well, I'm halfway through a flip. I keep landing on my head though. So we had to come up with something else. I don't even remember what we did, but definitely didn't have the Sabres the first year. That came later. Peas refers to the 4 or 5 people that were there at the beginning. Obviously, Kyle Singleton, Logan Riddick, myself, Dave Knight were all there to help at the very beginning. TJ Clemens was somebody else that was there at the beginning. He was my roommate my last year of college, or a housemate. And what a lot of people don't know is we could have had orange uniforms. Obviously, orange, the orange, going away from the shirts and ties and the sundresses was really big for Al Groh, the football coach at the time, and he wanted to see a sea of orange, or Orange Crush, whatever the sports marketing had put together that year. But he was really pushing orange, and I was on the committee to help decide the uniforms along with Al Groh's wife, Annie. It was Dr. Pease, myself, TJ was there, a couple people from the music department. The president sent someone from his staff. So it was a big deal. And we had a representative from a uniform company that was there working with us. And orange uniforms kept coming up. And the rest of us, those of us that were involved in bands knew that they would look super muddy on the field. And it just wasn't really going to work. So that was actually a fairly big argument at the time. We wanted to go with the white uniforms. Dr. Pease and a lot of them wanted to go with the Cavalier hats. I wanted to go with something a little more traditional, so I got outvoted on that one. But what we ended up doing was we had several different uniforms put together, and what we did was TJ and I, we had everyone in Scott Stadium from the committee, we're sitting in the stands. TJ and I would run through the tunnels out onto the field about the halfway point and walk around and show people what the uniforms would look like to the crowd. So I actually have a picture of me in one of the orange uniforms. I believe it was a similar pattern with the stripe that goes down to the hip, from the shoulder to the hip, and I believe it was orange and blue and a white stripe. So I think there were a couple other versions, but we almost had orange uniforms. Let's just say I made a fair amount of mistakes along the way, but I remember one year the band was at the ACC tournament. It was the first year so it was 2004 ACC tournament, and we had put a group together to go to Greensboro. I managed to forget to bring the music folders. So, and I showed up late to the pre-game meeting. So I was late, and there was some poor kid at the hotel fax machine on the phone with someone at the band office, and they were trying to fax us music. But I had managed to forget the crate of music folders, books. that was my job, and I forgot them. So let me just say that that was my first experience of failing in a very large public display, I suppose. I remember I accidentally deleted the band roster. The band roster, the very, very first semester, the very, very first year in the fall, when we were doing these interest meetings, Stephen Lawrence was a computer science major, so he had developed this little website, this just real-time website where he and I were uploading names and information so that Dr. Pease and Kalamazoo could see what was going on. And the list was getting pretty long. We were getting somewhere, and eventually that was transferred to an Excel file at some point. And I think one year, not 1 year, but a couple months later in the spring, we were finished with basketball season. We were getting ready for that first football season with the band. And I somehow managed to mess up the file. They had student workers back then, and I was working in the band office, and somehow I managed to rearrange the rows so that, or the names weren't matching up with the addresses and the email addresses. I forgot how I did that, but we couldn't go back. And the poor, I forget the girl's name, but there was a woman working as the administrative assistant to Dr. Pease, and had called me in a panic because the file was messed up, and I was the last one working on it. And I don't know how we got it back together, because that was basically it in terms of how you got in touch with people. And like I said, we didn't have Facebook back then. There was no good way to gather a large group of people, how to, to contact them other than email, and I managed to screw it up. There were 2 or 3 before Tiffany, and mostly temps, I think. Tiffany was the first real hire. Like I said, there would be ways of fixing that today, whereas there weren't back then. So I think that was my real first experience of failing and trying to learn how not to make it up to anybody, but how to fix it. Because even back then it was, not that the stakes were high, but I mean, that was a pretty big screw up. You don't know what to expect, I guess, when you're 18 and you're in college for the first time. I mean, it's just we've all experienced it. There's no expectations of anything. But I have been just completely blown away with the growth of the band in 10 years, now that it's in its 10th season. I think, not just in terms of the sound, in terms of the sound quality, in terms of the size. I think really what I've been blown away with is how, I suppose, how much it's been accepted by the larger community. I know a lot of band directors in the Northern Virginia area, and UVA is actually starting to be a destination for their band kids. I remember there was a study done when they were looking at whether or not they would have a band at UVA, and the University of Virginia would get about a quarter of the state band every year. So it was you always had quality musicians going to UVA, but now that there's a band in place, and now that a lot of the high school band directors in the area have seen what Dr. Pease and Dr. Cook are doing, it's become a destination, and it's become a spot where you can be a good musician, and not be a good music, or not be a music major, and there's a place for you. And I think I knew going into college I wasn't going to be a music major. I wasn't the best musician, but I was pretty good, and UVA band was perfect for me, because there were no expectations that you had to be a performance major or a music ed major. And of course, I would love to see UVA build out its music department into a school of music. I would certainly like to see that, but it doesn't have to be that way in order for it to be, I think, in the eyes of a lot of prospective band students, college band students, a destination. So I think that's how quickly that's come about has really just taken my breath away.